Hello and welcome back to today's security news. You see, our first story there is an e-crime rapper, which is something you are not going to hear every day. So excited to go through today's news stories. If you've got any feedback or anything I missed, just let me know in the comments. Look forward to seeing what you say. So for getting started, got e-crime rapper Punchmade debuts his card shop. So this story comes from Krebs on Security. And pretty much what's going on here is there's a 24-year-old Lexington native, Lexington, Kentucky, that is. He's been promoting wire fraud and other financial crimes through his rap music. So you'll see here he's got memorable hits such as Internet Swiping and Million Dollar Criminal. Got millions of views, and I listened to a few of the songs, and it's crazy. It's basically just step-by-step instructions of what he has going on and how to go through stuff. It's wild to think that people can get away with doing something like that. Like this is his YouTube channel. He's got 194,000 subscribers. See, I listened through the How to Write a Dump, which interesting song. I think the flow could be better, but the instructions were great, very clear. So super interesting that there's people out there doing that. I had no idea. But the story today, what he's done, the story Krebs on Security is reporting about, is he launched a website. Before then, there wasn't much of an idea of who this person was, and I mean, as part of that was trouble getting somebody in trouble legally for the actions that they're doing. And you can see here, they definitely have a lot of expensive, if it's real jewelry on, and that's a apparently functioning card skimmer on his chain right there. And he talks about that in some of his music. But this person launched a shop where you can buy different credentials, really, or different accounts that have money on them. So he's trying to make a little bit additional money that way. I'm not sure what the exact motive of it is, besides just making more money on it. And you'll see on here what is on the site. So you'll see you can buy Cash App logins, the 3 to 5,000 balance, and he's going to give you support. So that's great. And apparently he's super big on Telegram, or that's where the majority of his messaging and following is. And you can see all these different counts, payable, linkable CC, Chime, Woo, and OTP download. So it is wild that he's just getting all this through skimmers or card dumps, and then selling this information to these different accounts. So it's a very interesting setup for this individual. And like I mentioned, before they did this, there wasn't too much information that can be found about him, but now with the investigative journalism that Krebs and other have done, you can see there's more information about who this person is, where they're located, and I'm sure they'll be under a lot tighter radar for legal activities and just getting some evidence of proof of what they're doing, see if they could be brought in. But that is the individual, and yeah, there's stories about how his come up started, and yeah, just started being as a regular athlete, picked up 2K, and just started getting into more nefarious activities, if we say so. So, wild story. Thought it would be worth sharing. Punchmade Dev, and check out the music if you're interested. I'll put the link in the description below. It's super wild. Next one on the list is pretty important here. So it's about the Bangladeshi elections. I'm sure you've heard a lot about elections frauds through social media or different things like that, trying to affect and influence elections. So a big thing that's happening with the most recent Bangladeshi election was DDoS attacks. So while these elections were ramping up, you can see there was a mobile app that was providing critical information to Bangladeshi voters ahead of the election. It was targeted with DDoS attacks. So it just was a disruption effort, like it says here. It's just meddling with the national vote. So people that are trying to communicate through this mobile app and get information through there about voting locations and the time frame for that, not being able to have access to that is super effective. And just for reference, their election did occur on January 7th. So this is something that has already transpired, but it's interesting to see attacks like this ramping up, and I'm sure, I mean, this is an election cycle in the US, so sure stuff like this will start to be more and more talked about and effective for disrupting elections. It's always scary to think about. And as I said here, technology or telecommunication companies might be targeted by DDoS attacks before elections to disrupt communication channels, thereby hindering this dissemination of information and potentially impacting voter communication and coordination. Could be politically motivated to create confusion, suppress voter turnout, or undermine the credibility of the electoral process. So hopefully, I say hopefully, but it's unlikely that these won't become wider spread. I mean, it's a popular thing going on right now, and it's only a matter of time before it spreads even more. So the security, Mohammed here, the security of the Bangladesh Election Commission let everybody know that the app got hit by the cyber attack, and it was super interesting. A lot of the bad traffic came from these two locations, Germany and Ukraine. Um, yeah, I mean, it says here origination of the data provides clues as to the motivations and actors behind politically motivated attacks, but there's nothing obvious here for Western European and Ukrainian attackers here trying to get into or disrupt the Bangladesh elections. So it gives a little breakdown here as well. So 15% of the traffic came from the US, 9% from Indonesia, then all these other countries were around 4 to 5. So it is wild to see that. I mean, they were just super widespread. There was no like one location they can put their finger on and be like, yeah, that's where the attacks were coming from. Like for contrast to that, said another example is for or about 80% of the DDoS attacks targeting Taiwan last year came from China. That makes sense. They're super close. I mean, there's very much a political pull or political motivation to have those kind of attacks there. And oops, the threat here to future elections is something that I mentioned a couple times, but it is wild to think with the US election cycle being this year and many other countries having elections all the time, it is wild to think how much of an effect cyber attacks can have on elections like that. So hopefully there's more solutions to stop this stuff from happening going forward, but it feels like a long hill to climb up to actually make that work. Next story on the docket here is from our friends over at Google. So this is part of the exploits we talked about on Wednesday. The zero-day vulnerability that we talked about allows code injection. So the CVE itself is a memory corruption security bug and is an out-of-bounds memory access issue with Chrome's V8 JavaScript engine. So basically what that means is that they can leverage these vulnerabilities to scan or to access sensitive info in adjacent memory locations on affected systems, cause it to crash, modify data, or inject malicious code. So it's definitely a high risk piece of what's going on. And something I thought was really interesting that came out of this, well, one, this has patches available. So like many other security breaches or exploitations, patching your system is a good way to go about getting that all taken care of. But something that Google maintains is the 0 days that they see in the wild. So this isn't something that I was aware that they kept. Of course, they keep it in a Google Doc because they are Google. And it shows basically all their CVEs, all the 0 days that they have over the past 10 or so years. So if you're interested in reading about what type of disclosures they have, what products are getting hit, where they're coming from, and they have advisories for each of them as well. So it's really interesting to see what a company like Google has been dealing with over the last 10 years and what zero-day vulnerabilities they're seeing out in the wild. And a lot of these, I mean, you'll see some of them aren't Google, but I think a lot of these are found by the Google Threat Analysis Group, which is why they end up here. But definitely worth checking that out. Again, link will be in the description on that one. The next story we'll cover is this Docker story. So this is another vulnerability that we talked about, or no, this isn't one that we had talked about previously. Sorry, this one with Docker. Docker is a container-focused cyber attacks, which have a new type of payload, a gray area traffic generating tool that creates artificial page views for websites known as 9-hits traffic exchange. So this one's super weird. 9-hits is not, again, not something I was very familiar with. This story talks a bit about it. Um, it's basically sending fake traffic to websites for advertisers to bite and say, hey, okay, they've got a lot more traffic than suspected, or a lot more traffic, so we'll pay for advertisements on their websites. And like they say here, it's a little bit shady, being used to inflate a site's actual visitor engagement numbers in a quest for luring advertisers, but it's not illegal unless, of course, it's being planted into an organization's infrastructure without consent, thus stealing computing resources. So they go on to say that is what's happening in this situation. Oops. Okay, and then they say the attacks, like they say here, Cato says the attackers in a fresh campaign are targeting vulnerable Docker services to deploy two separate containers, an XMRing crypto miner and 9-hits. So 9-hits we talked about, crypto miner is fairly self-explanatory, using the computing resources to mine cryptocurrency, which, like they discussed before, that tandem makes it super illegal. 9-hits itself is super sketchy, but not necessarily illegal what they do. They said the former is a well-known malicious payload, but the latter is entirely novel, which is referring to 9-hits. And attackers always seek more strategies to profit from comprised hosts. We can observe the process being run, allowing the 9-hits app to authenticate with their servers and pull a list of sites to visit. Once visited, the session owner is awarded a credit on the 9-hits platform. So something certainly sketchy. They finish off saying here the credits can then be turned into traffic to the attacker's site of choice, which in turn can be monetized in any number of created ways, including selling it to an ad network. So an interesting setup here in what's going on with Docker at the moment. Okay, the next story we've got here is this TeamViewer abuse. And actually, I'm going to plug my laptop in real quick. I guess the battery wasn't going. All right. So this one, the title is pretty self-explanatory. TeamViewer abused to breach networks and ransomware attacks. So TeamViewer, if you don't know, it's used by a lot of organizations. It's like a software that you download on your end, and then you can give me a code, and I can control what's happening on your machine. So with that, TeamViewer is a very powerful tool for helping IT teams to troubleshoot on user devices, but if used in the wrong hands, it can be very dangerous because you would have access to so much. And it's a tool you see a lot in phishing scheme or social engineering schemes. That you may see people like Kitboga and others go through on their channels. But the interesting part about this one is that they're installing ransomware, which like using TeamViewer to get access and then installing ransomware onto a user's machine. And as they go on to say here, it is certainly not the first time that this is happening. And what you'll see here, this is the ransomware note that is pushed. So what happens? Your network is encrypted and currently not operational. And then it goes on to say what the demands are. We are not a politically motivated group and we do not need anything other than your money. If you pay, we will provide you the programs for decryption and we will delete your data and we will delete your data. If you don't give it to us, basically we'll delete your data. So you can pay the ransom amount to this contact email, this crypto address and wallet. And then once it's complete, you can send a photo and then they'll unlock you. So it's very interesting. Um, yeah, it'd be so jarring to receive something like this on your end, to get a ransom note like this. So they go on to talk a little bit about how something like this happens. This is a note from TeamViewer. So at TeamViewer, we take the security and integrity of our platform extremely seriously and unequivocally condemn any form of malicious use of our software, of course. Our analysis shows that the most instances of unauthorized access involve a weakening of TeamViewer's default security settings. This often includes the use of easily guessable passwords, which is only possible by using an outdated version. We constantly emphasize the importance of maintaining strong security practices, such as using complex passwords, multi-factor authentication, allow lists, regular updates to the latest software versions. So, like many other appliances or issues or vulnerabilities that we talk about, keeping things up to date, super important. I know it can be a burden on IT resources or DevOps resources, but I mean, for yourself as an individual, super good to keep things up to date so you're not vulnerable there. And TeamViewer also has a support to these or a link to these best practices in the article as well. The next one on the list, this is one we have talked about a little bit. Um, well, a name we've seen a little bit. On Wednesday, we talked about Ivanti and a different breach that had popped up on their end, and now they're back. So, as a company, you never want to be back on the security updates and seeing what's going on. But this isn't the same one we discussed, which is crazy. It's just another one that's popping up. Um, and this one is a little bit different. It's a critical authentication bypass vulnerability in their endpoint mobile manager or manager mobile and mobile iron core device management software. So these are what manage end user devices such as laptops. If they're issuing any mobile devices like phones to their employees, this would be included in here as well. And they talk about the CVE, link to it if you want more info, but it's a remote unauthenticated API access vulnerability affecting all versions, well, all these versions here. Then it allows attackers access to PII of mobile device users and can let them backdoor compromise servers when chaining the bug on with other flaws. So for context, PII, I mean, it says the breakdown of what it is here, but that would include like name, social security, number, credit card info. A lot of that falls into the PII category. Oops. And on this one, you can see a breakdown of where this is happening at. So there's 6,300 instances of this EPMM user portals that are exposed to the public. So these are ones that would all be effective or all have potential to be affected by this exploit. So if you are using it at your company, definitely worth patching it and getting it updated. Make sure you get yourself taken care of there. The next one talks about an APT, which is an advanced persistent threat called ColdRiver. And for context, APTs are, like I said, advanced persistent threats, but they're usually state sponsored. So the financing or the backing that they get is from a country or state, as they refer to in state sponsored. So in this case, it's Russia, and ColdRiver is the APT, and it released some malware called Spica. So this one is pretty interesting. It's got a lot of targets here. Let me grab this spot. Yeah, so they're typically targeting NGOs, intelligence and military officers, and NATO governments to carry out cyber espionage. But in this case, they are going more into ransomware. So yeah, they're saying their motivation in the past has been inflating accounts that house sensitive or infiltrating accounts that house sensitive information with credential phishing. But it looks like they're turning a new leaf in a bad way here. So how they're doing stuff here, this is a backdoor. So how it works, ColdRiver presents PDF documents as a new op-ed or other type of article that the impersonation account is looking to publish. asking for feedback from the target. When the user opens a benign PDF, the text appears encrypted. So you get this PDF doc saying, hey, you got to check this out. When you go to check it out, it's actually encrypted. So now you need to reach out to them, and they're going to send you this decryption utility to be able to read the document, and that decryption utility is actually the malware. So once opened, it says Spica opens a supposedly decoded PDF as a decoy while quietly establishing persistence and hooking up with its command and control server. So what are they trying to do? Executing arbitrary shell commands, stealing cookies, uploading and downloading files, and then they're going through the file system to see what's in there, and enumerating documents and exfiltrating them in an archive. So the note here, we believe there may be multiple versions of this backdoor, each with a different embedded decoy document to match the lure, or to match the lure document sent to targets. So it's tough to find where it's at, and when anything leaves a backdoor is just an entry point that they put into your system that they can come back to at a later time. So it's always tough to find those backdoors. And they talk here of what they're trying to do. So the goals are, of course, aligned to the Russian state interests. For instance, election hacking, like we talked about in the previous story. So unfortunately, a lot of that popping up. Um, the one in December that was mentioned earlier in this story, the goal is to influence the UK's democratic process by heisting and leaking sensitive documents available. So this trend is probably going to continue. So just be careful. Stuff you're reading out there online and on the internet, including this through the election cycle that's coming up. So on to our next story is actually an American university, Kansas State. Cyberattack disrupted their IT network and services. So this one gives a breakdown of what happened. So it announced that it's managing a cybersecurity incident that disrupted their network systems, including their VPN, their email system, and their video services for Canvas and MediaSite. Canvas is just a learning education tool. Not super familiar with MediaSite. Kansas State University, it's just a large American university based in Kansas. This is their Twitter account. They acknowledge that the breach was ongoing and they were trying to contain it. They mention here, so they're working quickly to get it up and running, and they're also engaging third-party IT forensics experts to figure out what's going on, get to the bottom of it, and resolve it. So the motivation behind this one, there's no clear motive on it. Who knows if it's a student that was just testing out what they could do, or if somebody had attempts to steal student information. I'm not sure exactly what the motive is there, but if I hear anything else on this one, see any other motive, I will certainly update the story. This one references Have I Been Pwned, the popular tool that'll tell you if your accounts were part of a data breach. They uploaded 71 million records from the nas.api stolen account list. So this is a list I was not familiar with, but you'll see here, this is Have I Been Pwned, their website. It's a website where you can just put an email address here, and it'll show if you have any credentials that have been breached there. You can see recently added breaches. This was a pretty significant one for the breaches that they've recently added to the site. And you'll see they've got a list of their largest breaches, so it's not quite up there, but it is a significant amount of records that were added. So for a little bit of context for NAS.api, it's a dataset allegedly containing over 1 billion lines of stolen credentials compiled from the credential stuffing list and from information stealing malware logs. It should be noted out while the dataset name includes the word NAS, it is not related to network attached storage devices. So this has been something that's been out in the open for quite a while. Like it says here, it rose to notoriety after it was used to fuel an open source intelligence platform called illicit.services. So this service allowed visitors to search a database of stolen info, including names, phone numbers, email addresses, and other personal data. Service was shut down in July 2023 out of concerns it was being used for doxing and SIM swapping attacks, but came back online in December. So according to Hunt, who he's the creator of Have I Been Pwned, it contains about 319 files, which is about 104 gigabytes, and has over 70 million unique email addresses. And he says in here, for each email address, there are likely many other records for the different sites credentials were stolen from, and the data appears to be pretty old. Some of it dating back as old as 13 years, he says, in the report and what he's seen. So you can go to Have I Been Pwned and check your credentials. The only downfall with doing that is that, it's been infected at some point. The credentials were stolen at some point, but there's not a specific website that ties back to it. So it's hard to know exactly which record has been stolen. So it's definitely worth updating your password. The recommendation here, so it talks about recommended that you change your passwords for all your saved account, includes passwords for VPNs, email addresses, bank accounts, any other personal info. Then if they're attempting, as info stealers attempt to steal cryptocurrency wallets, you should immediately transfer any other wallet or transfer any crypto to another wallet if you happen to own any. So that is what we've got today. I appreciate you all listening. Got the music back on, and we'll be back on Monday for more stories. Anything I missed, anything you want to see more of, or any other sources you want to see, just comment down below. Thank you so much, and have a great day.